It does take time, but when you get it, the dominoes will.
What does it take to start, scale, and exit multiple successful companies? Colin C. Campbell has done it all. From co-founding some of the biggest names in tech like Tucows and Hostopia to creating the .club domain that was ultimately sold to GoDaddy.
We had hundreds of employees, front page of the Profit magazine at the time. Forward 16 months later, the company filed for bankruptcy protection. That $19 a share, I ended up selling all my shares for 6 cents a share.
But here's the real story. What drives an entrepreneur to keep repeating the process of building and selling companies even after achieving success?
Bad things do happen. Focus on your core business, but then also when you start getting to a certain point, begin to think about launching new businesses outside of existing businesses. Don't panic if you haven't figured out your X factor on day one. I think that everybody thinks they have a great idea, but ideas are worthless. Actions are priceless.
In this episode, Colin shares his journey of innovation, the lessons he's learned from the highs and lows of entrepreneurship, and why his latest book, Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, is a must-read for anyone looking to build a lasting business legacy.
He also launched a company called Hostopia. Fast forward 6 years later, Hostopia became the fastest growing company in Canada.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. I'm also a big user of HubSpot products. They've supported the show for over 3 years now. And for all entrepreneurs out there, I need you to go back to a time and place when building businesses, as tough as it is, can be sometimes a little bit fun. When you're marketing, it should be fun. But marketing is not so fun anymore because it's very time consuming, it's very difficult, and it feels like there's just a lot of friction. Content was simpler to make, leads were easier to capture, and we weren't all spread so thin. As marketers, as entrepreneurs, the bottom line is that marketing used to be fun. It's not so fun anymore. But with HubSpot's newly launched marketing and content hubs, I've been using it myself. It brings a little bit of fun and creativity back into marketing for your business. You're going to generate better content, you're going to generate more leads, and next level results, which really make marketing fun again. So with tools like Content Remix, you can turn existing assets into all new pieces with just one click. Lead scoring helps you shine a light on the leads that are most likely to purchase, and analytics suites they built out will help you with reports, KPIs, and just a gold mine of AI-powered insights. It's quick to get your results. It's easy to use. It connects all your teams and your data. So put the fun back into your marketing funnel with HubSpot. Visit HubSpot.com to get started for free. Colin, I'm excited. I'm excited to do this. This is like a long time coming. We should have done this probably 6 months ago, but I digress. Okay. We're here. So, I mean, when we talk about entrepreneurship, I think a lot of people have a lot of failures. I don't know if many people have had failures as large as some of your failures when you were trying to build things out and when you're first starting. So I think that's a really fun place to start it because it will sort of show what you have to go through to be successful. So let's kick it off there. So talk to me about were you always an entrepreneur? Were you born an entrepreneur? Was that something that was just inherent to you, or?
Well, whether it was selling puppy dogs at the flea market or delivering newspapers, or setting up a small business in college, we've always had that sort of mindset. I think it comes from my parents. Come from a farming background as well. We own farms in the family. Hardworking background. Always selling vegetables at the market. That kind of stuff. So it was great growing up, having that kind of experience, and went to college, got a commerce degree, business degree, and right out of college, we started a software rental business. This was in 1993 up in Toronto. Okay, and it lasted.
You explain on software.
Yeah. Okay. So software. So you can actually, before 1994, January 1st, 1994, the free trade agreement came into place, and Bill Gates convinced them to put in a tiny law that said software rental would not be legal in Canada. And what software rental was basically is there diskettes at the time, and you'd rent the diskettes, bring them home, but of course people would put some of those on the computer or duplicate them. And so there's probably a good reason it was outlawed, but we had set up 2 stores, and literally within 18 months, we had to close both of those stores. And it was fascinating exit too, because what we did well on that exit was we learned how to maximize failure. We actually ran full-page ads saying the government is outlawing software rental, and we had lineups out the door. But what was cool is we also started something called a BBS, a bulletin board service. This was just before the advent of the World Wide Web. And we had thousands of members who were paying us to be on this BBS, bulletin board service. It grew actually quite large. But something else came along, and it was called the information superhighway. I'm using some old terms here.
Yeah, I know you're using
the internet.
You are. I don't think people understand how early you are in online internet digital entrepreneurship. You were probably one of the first.
We were one of the first internet access companies in Canada. It became. I'll jump into that one first, but we were also the second largest bulletin board service. But because we didn't have the funding from the banks looked at us and said, "Okay, this internet thing, get out of here," right? So they said we decided to shut down our second business. We shut down our BBS just to use the phone lines for the internet business. And it turned out to be a good decision, because when we went to a trade show a couple of years later, all the people who kept their BBS opened, their buggy whips running, they were all out of business. And all the people that transitioned from this industry to the next, they were successful. Well, we grew that company, Scott, to become the largest ISP in Canada, became the 7th fastest growing company in Canada, the 3rd fastest growing company in Canada in 1998. Literally one of the most successful stories. It was a publicly traded company. We decided to merge it with a cable company called Look Communications, and we were granted a license by the government, wireless license for all of Canada for fixed wireless internet. It was incredible.
Around that, by the way, that's like wild. So if someone's listening to this, at that time, who were your competitors?
So you'd have TELUS, Bell Canada, Rogers, and the government thought we can create extra competition by awarding this license to this other company, this internet service.
We're larger than all of them?
We were larger than as an ISP until later on. When we start getting to the later 90s, they began to just take off. And they were late to the game. We see that often in paradigm shifts in where technologies are adopted and big companies are slow to the market. And I always say, enter the entrepreneur. And that's what we do. We build it, and we build it up to become big, and then we sell it to the competitors, the larger companies. But here's this company. We had hundreds of employees. We're on the front page of the Profit magazine at the time, which is like the Inc. magazine up in Canada. It's one of the fastest growing companies in Canada. And something happened in March of 2000. I know you're too young to remember this, but that was the time when a judge announced that they were going to break up Microsoft. And we had sold the company. We were down, our shareholders got 40%. So we were no longer in control of the company. And the stock that we did get after that we won the license went to as high as $19 a share. It was well over $1 billion. And I had...
How old are you?
I was 28 years old at the time, at 130 million in stock.
That's wild.
It was insane. Oh, it was incredible.
Because before that, you didn't have any big financial wins. You had...
Okay, so we did. I did have one financial win. Okay, and that was a company called Tucows. Today it's worth almost $500 million. And that's another story.
Okay, we talk about that.
We'll get to that in a minute. But here's this company, Internet Direct, publicly traded, $19 a share, one of the fastest growing companies in Canada. And they decide to break up Microsoft. We have something called the .com crash. There just wasn't enough chairs to go around. The people running and controlling the company said, oh, let's go back. Let's pull our $50 million offering. We're doing a secondary offering because the NASDAQ had gone from 5,000 to 4,000. Well, guess what, Scott? It went all the way to 1,200. Now that is a crash. Fast forward 16 months later, company filed for bankruptcy protection, and I ended up selling that $19 a share. I ended up selling all my shares for 6 cents a share. From one of the fastest growing companies in Canada to last place finish. And that really, really hit me hard. I had failed myself. I had failed my business partners. I had failed my family, my investors, my employees. We had 12 paper millionaires as well. And what went wrong? And I look back at that and I try to understand what went wrong with this huge failure. And really it was 2 things. One, we had done a lockup agreement for 18 months, thinking that things are just going to keep getting better and better. 18 months from now, this will be a bigger company. We'll sell for even more money. We didn't know there was going to be a crash. but bad things do happen. And that's what happened. We had the dot-com crash, and there just wasn't enough shares to go around. So the reality is that company went down. And you're probably saying at this point, why did I invite this guy on my show? He's had 3 huge failures in his first 3 businesses.
Lost $130 million.
Yeah, and I was about 95% of my wealth at the time. Yeah. We were lucky in that we had also done a company called Tucows. Tucows was software download at the time. And we launched that business, and fortunately, it did very well because we had a huge technical problem. Internet was very expensive, and this was downloading software, and it took down our servers when we launched it. And so we decided to create mirror sites for each ISP globally. Well, it was a technical solution. It turned out to be a genius marketing thing. And what happened was all the ISPs around the world would mirror our website, and they'd have local downloadable sites so that they would reduce their internet costs. But what it did is it gave us a global presence, and we became one of the top 100 websites on the internet by PC Magazine. We built it to $5 million in revenue, and then we sold it to the group behind ICQ, a billionaire group. And that was interesting too, because that was the first time I began to taste money. In fact, there's a story there.
Walk me through the timeline though too, just so.
Yeah, so that's 1998. So that's just before the collapse of Internet Direct.
You had the bandwidth to build these at the same time.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that in the book, Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, about this concept of focus on your core business, but then also when you start getting to a certain point, begin to think about launching new businesses outside of existing businesses. And so you picked up on something very interesting there, because when we were at the software rental, we launched a BBS. And then when we were at the BBS, we launched an ISP. And then we're at the ISP, we launched Tucows. And then we also launched a company called Hostopia. And fast forward 6 years later, Hostopia became the fastest growing company in Canada, number 1. And we took it public, and we sold it to a Fortune 500 company 2 years after that for 17 times EBITDA. It was a phenomenal exit. And guess what? It was a month before the Lehman crisis. That's how close we're talking. But going back,
That's a very...
it's crazy. And we talk a lot in the book about the stories. And by the way, they're not just my stories in the book. We interviewed over 200 people, including individuals like Joe Foster, who I know you've interviewed as well from Reebok. His story is incredible. But I will tell you, you asked earlier about, the first early days, when I was 27 years old, and we lived in a very tiny home in Oakville, very old car in tiny home, very, big mortgage, the whole kind of thing, although prices of homes were cheaper back then, but much cheaper. And we sold Tucows for $30 million. And it was split 3 ways. We had to pay 37% capital gains tax. So, there was still, we made a lot of money in a very short period of time. And you go from the 0 to $7 million of wealth, whatever I walked away at that time. And I remember a story, because my wife really never believed that any of this was happening. She would, I'm doing this thing. I think we're going to sell this company. So we closed the transaction around 1 o'clock in the morning. It took about 5 hours back then to sign all the documents. And so they gave us a check. It sounds funny. They gave us a certified check for $22 million, the first payment. And I was holding a check, and I brought it home. And I walked up to the 3rd floor, a skinny, tiny little home. And I walk into the room, and I tap on my wife's shoulder, and I hand her this check for $22 million. And she's like, bleary-eyed. It's like 1:30 in the morning. And she looks at it, and she goes, I don't understand. I don't understand the zeros. Like, I didn't say anything. She just couldn't understand the zeros. There were just too many zeros. And but it was interesting going from that point of, where you're really struggling as an entrepreneur to that one event happens, and the next thing you know, you're a multimillionaire. So that was an interesting thing.
That was a while. So from 25 to 30, this was a roller coaster.
Yeah, it was the internet boom. And it was amazing, right?
Right place, right time. We're focusing on internet companies. That's really what you focused on.
And the next idea that came, that idea of Hostopia, that was the next company. It was, again, publicly traded. That idea came because we had a customer who was at SaskTel, Saskatchewan Telecom.
That was acquired by
called us up
eventually, right?
I don't know, but they called us up and they wanted to license our platform for hosting.
By the way, I just want to say one thing. So for the audience, a lot of like Americans in the audience. So this is like AT&T, Verizon, like these are the comparables, right? So you're talking about telcos. These are the behemoths that are in the U.S. Similar companies in Canada. If you're talking about Rogers and Bell and Telus and whatnot. So just to give a comparison, so people understand like the game that you were playing in the space that you're playing in.
Yeah. So SaskTel called us up. They wanted us to license our hosting platform. So, bing, ding, ding, ding. If SaskTel wants it, maybe Bell Canada wants it, maybe Telus wants it, maybe Vodafone wants it. So we launched that company, and we did sell to 9 out of 10 telecoms in Canada. We broke into the United States, and we ended up selling to AT&T, Vodafone, British Telecom. And we talk about a really cool story in the book about scaling and how we found our X factor. And this is something that I think that if any entrepreneur does, if they can figure out their X factor. Now, what is an X factor? Think Domino's Pizza, 30 minutes are free. You know, National Car Rental, you just get in the car and go. Vern Harnish talks about this. He talks about solving a bottleneck in a particular industry. You're solving a problem. And a lot of us can be, working today in companies and see, there's a lot of bottlenecks, but AI could do this, this, and this. And ding, 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 that's where the idea for a company can come along. And so that's what at Hostopia, our X factor was a 100% migration guarantee. So here we are in 2005. I've been told that we're going to lose the Earthlink deal. Earthlink was if you remember that company, it was a relatively large telecom at the time. Really large ISP.
This is one of the companies that you were selling to. You were selling the hosting.
We would sell our hosting services to, yeah, exactly.
And you sold, like you said, so to 9 out of 10 telcos. Earthlink was just one of the other large enterprise companies.
Earthlink was one of the big ones before we broke into the U.S. And but we were told we were not going to get this deal. And I said, okay, I grabbed the CTO. We got on a plane. We flew down. We met with this mid-level executive at Earthlink. And he said, okay, let's go to lunch. But he actually had a Wego. This is 2005. A Wego was one of the first electric cars, but it only had 2 seats. So I had my CTO sit in the front, and I sat in the trunk of this vehicle, and we drove to lunch.
And this is all just to close this deal.
Well, we do anything to close the deal, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what closed the deal, I'll be quite frank. And we told him at lunch, he says, we're willing to guarantee 100% migration. See, our buyer's not Earthlink. Wasn't AT&T. Our buyer were mid-level executives who were fearful of being fired at their job if they make a mistake. And migrations are probably one of the number one reasons why these IT folks get fired. So we came in and said, well, we'll guarantee it. And we would pay fair market value. At the time, it was $350 a website. We were moving over 80,000 websites and probably about 1 million email addresses. And we guaranteed if we lose one website, we'll pay you $350. Imagine losing 10,000 websites, 3.5 million we'd have to pay the company. I mean, this was serious
But what you're doing is a very smart strategy for an entrepreneur, for somebody trying to sell anything. You're de-risking the deal completely.
Yeah, well, we're making it so he doesn't get fired.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but by him not worrying about getting fired, all of a sudden you just made it like you removed all the risk and the stress in making a buying decision, basically.
It wasn't easy though, let me tell you.
And also you're putting yourself on the line.
It was not easy, and we re-engineered our entire organization. Just think of what Domino's Pizza had to do to get it in 30 minutes or free, right? It wasn't easy. You had to re-engineer your entire organization. We had hundreds of people in the Ukraine who were all manually looking at websites. We had heuristics that we designed and developed to move over websites and migrate them. And we also stopped letting the customer dictate to us how they wanted it done, because if they said something that could lead to a migration mistake or an error, and this happened before this, by the way. Yeah, I won't go into all of our stories, but we once, there was one telecom that lost 3 million emails, went offline, and CNN's talking about it. It's all because they wanted to change their user settings, but we wouldn't let that happen anymore in this Earthlink deal. Well, we won Earthlink, And we didn't only just win Earthlink, we won AT&T, Vodafone, British Telecom, all the South American telecoms. It was a domino effect that was unbelievable. And then we became the #1 global standard for outsourcing email and hosting to telecoms. And it was because of the X factor. I can't tell you how important it is. Now, don't panic if you haven't figured out your X factor on day one. I often talk to students who are just starting their business. I ask them to think about it. But it took us 6 years to get the X factor. You know, I'm certain it's taken Domino's years to get theirs, and National Car Rental, the same thing. It does take time, but when you get it, the dominoes will fall.
When you look at sort of that X factor you discovered, it led to this huge success. As an entrepreneur, how do you make sure that you don't screw up that success or that growth? Because now you're scaling, but I mean, there's all these other components that you have to make sure don't break as you scale, as you take on all these customers, especially if you're going to be guaranteeing that they don't go down, or there's like a financial issue and there's a financial reason why you can't screw this up.
Yeah, I mean, you have to re-engineer your organization. You have to re-engineer your systems. But the first thing we did there was we found out who our customer really was. It wasn't a telecom. It was a mid-level executive, right? That's important. And then once we figured out what made that person tick, first, not get fired, second, look like a hero, right? Then we can build a brand promise around that. I call it, in the book, I call it the nearly unbearable brand promise. So it's just something that's almost unbearable. But if you can do it and you can deliver on it, you know, and there's so many examples I can use. I use a lot more in the book. I use another one called Cookie Delivery. This is a company that actually had the domain cookiedelivery.com. And they wanted to win the cookie market in that city. It's a city in Texas. And they decided to create a mobile truck to bake the cookies on the way to the office. So when they arrived at the office, they're piping hot. Well, all the other bakeries would send these cookies from the bakery to the office, and you know they were cold when they arrived. So they solved that bottleneck, and they won in that marketplace. It's absolutely incredible. I love that chapter, the X Factor in the book, and yeah.
Okay, so this is wait, at this point, this is your second public or third public? Second public. Okay. So how did that story end up? Because so
that's the one that we sold
right before
to a Fortune 500
that's right, okay.
company for 17 times EBITDA, and it was in the 9 figures, and it was a great exit, and you know it was I called it, okay, my lad. Because I was running public.
You don't know if you can swear?
Yeah,
you can swear. Yeah,
I called it Vindification, because so many of the shareholders would call me up and scream at me. I had a fight with my business partner. He had to leave the company. He was dumping shares after the IPO. It was a mess. It was a little bit of a mess, right? And then also I had the board beginning to move on me as well. So I felt pretty good about it. I really did feel good about it. You know, I did make a commitment to work for this Fortune 500 company for 3 years, and I actually did that. And it was very, very tough. I hated it. But I worked at the very top of the corporation, and I got to understand what moves, how a corporation makes decisions, why they're risk averse. I begun to really understand corporate America and the culture in corporate America as well. I do want to talk about one other problem I had at Hostopia, and that was, and you brought it up earlier, you know, the scaling thing, like you're trying to scale. So we actually began to flatline in 2006. And because of the problems with my business partner leaving the company and the shares being sold, a board member came to me and says, look, I think you might be over your head, Colin, as CEO. And, you know, I was feeling it, right? And we didn't have control of the board. There were venture capitalists on the board and whatnot. And we've all seen this story before. So I called a lifeline, a friend called me up, and I met this gentleman named Patrick Thean, who runs a company called Rhythm Systems. And I went to Vegas, met him in Vegas. I said, I just need you to get the board off my back, you know, because they want to see a professionally managed company. Just need to get them off my back. So can you just give me some stuff to do, or I'll just say you're hired or whatever. He said, no, I don't want to work with you. Because what are you talking about? Because unless you do it right, then I don't want to work with you. This is like somebody who's overweight going to the doctors and saying, yeah, I don't really want to work out. I don't want to change my lifestyle. Just give me the pill, right? That's it. That's all I want. It's just the pill, right? And no, he said, I'm not going to work with you unless you do it right. And we did it right.
What do you mean by do it right?
So that's what I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to tell you right now. So what that meant was 2 days of strategic planning, once a year, once a quarter, and 90 days of execution. We had goal setting implemented, red, yellow, green, for the company goals for the year, the quarter, and the individuals, 3 to 5 SMART goals. We implemented daily sales huddle. We implemented a lot of systems that help the company scale. See, as entrepreneurs, we have the right instinct generally, but really, really don't know what the heck we're doing when we get too big. Most people don't. And if you can implement the right systems, they can help you scale your company as well.
How did that get the board off of your back?
Because
you're doing all the right.
Within 90 days, you can see the numbers turning around. Within 3 years, we almost tripled our revenue. Like, this was incredible. By implementing these systems, see, you understand, when we used to have situations where, 2 days before the end of the quarter, somebody says, we didn't get the deal, or, we messed this up, or something happens. We got blindsided all the time. And so by implementing these systems, it really helped us scale the company. And so that's one of the key chapters in the book I talk about, is how to scale by using systems. There's really 4 things we need to think about in scaling. It's the story, which we talked about, the X factor, that's the story, how it changes from start, the people, including yourself, and who's around you. That's interesting. The money and the systems. So we've talked about the story, we've talked about the systems. Let me also add to you about the people. The number one reason why most companies in America fail to scale is because of the entrepreneur themselves.
A big shout out to HubSpot and the HubSpot Podcast Network for sponsoring Success Story. If you enjoy Success Story, you're going to enjoy a ton of podcasts brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, including Hustle and Flowchart, hosted by Joey Fear. The Hustle and Flowchart podcast with Joey is all about how to build a business so it gives you the freedom and fuel for your life. You're going to join Joey as he discusses systems, mindset tweaks, reframes, and strategies for entrepreneurs and really anyone to enjoy the process of being in business and having fun. This isn't for entrepreneurs looking to build a billion-dollar business. It's for somebody who wants to build a lifestyle, somebody who is looking to build systems that work. Listen to Hustle and Flowchart wherever you get your podcasts. That was going to be my next question, because I was curious if you feel that all entrepreneurs should stick around for the life cycle of the company. You did it successfully, but I have seen instances where entrepreneurs maybe aren't the right fit. They're good for 0 to 5, 0 to 10, maybe even 10 to 50, maybe even 50 to 100. But post-IPO or even pre-IPO, are they the right fit to bring that sort of over the finish line? You saw that post about Paul Graham?
Founder mode versus manager mode?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm well aware of it. And actually, so I live in a world right now where we run a family office. I've invested in 20 companies, and I've removed CEOs at certain stages and brought in professional managers. At the same time, when I was there, I felt I had the capability of delivering the goods, but you could see people were saying, well, now you're a little bit too young, maybe we need to bring in a professional manager. So I've sort of played both sides, and I just think it really depends. But I also believe that every entrepreneur has the ability to be in founder mode and to scale the company if they so choose. But the first thing they need to do is understand who they are and what their personality profile is. And we talk a lot about personality profiles in the book. And then what we want to do, if we really want to scale, we want to hire executives around us who have a particular personality profile for that position. And I think the personality profile is actually more important than skills and even experience. Although I have to say, experience does matter. We're going to want to hire people with runway. That's Jack Welch's comment. But we don't want to hire people. If we're over $1 million and we want to go to 10 million, we want to hire the people who are working at the $10 million company. We don't want to hire the people at the $1 billion company. It's too extreme. I've seen that mistake happen as well, when you bring executives down into smaller businesses. But what we do want to do is we want to make certain we hire a team of people around us that have the right personality profile. And under the DISC methodology, it's dominant, influence, stability, and conscientiousness. Under that philosophy, we're going to want to hire D somethings. So if you want people to be proactive, you want them to be entrepreneurial, you want them to create wealth for you, then you need to hire the right leader. And having a leader who's a DI or a DC or a DS, that's critical for helping you scale your business. And that's what we did at Hostopia. literally we had so many D's around the table, it was dangerous. Because, I joke about this. Elliot Noss, who's the CEO of Tucows today, we hired him back in 1998, and he used to drive me nuts. He's constantly fought me on everything. He just like it is.
That's like an A. That's an A personality. That's an A+ person, personality, player. Like they have their own opinions.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they make the mistake of the growing, and they want people just to listen to them. They want the naysayers. Well, no, I'm here to say, bring in the people who are going to challenge you. Bring in those people with that personalities. And what's fascinating is they go and create wealth for you. Well, in this repeat section of the book, we start talking about how serial entrepreneurs can create wealth, not only by hiring executives around them, but by hiring CEOs to run the companies for them and finding the right business profile. The last component is money. And it's really important to try to raise the right type of funding for the right situation. And we've done everything from venture capital to the IPOs, as you know, to the Reg D, which is a private placement memorandum, and haven't done the Reg CF yet, which I am absolutely fascinated by. The Reg CF, which you can raise up to $5 million, and it's essentially allowing you to solicit securities, and you can do this actually along with the crypto coin too, if you really want to get into that, or you don't even have to use the coin. But I'm seeing real estate projects that are tokenizing, and we're seeing some fascinating stuff out there. It was really hopeful SPACs would make a bit of a, where it would be well. I mean, they completely blew up, and that was an issue. But it's been very hard for entrepreneurs to raise money unless you go down that venture private equity group. And in the book, we talk a lot about venture capital, and we used venture capital. And I think the right type of company should use venture capital. Let me ask you a question, Scott. What percentage of companies that receive venture capital fail?
It's a great question. I've never heard a question phrased like that.
I mean, you hit the lottery, right? Yeah. You hit it big, didn't you?
I feel like I'm gonna get sidelined by the answer. I feel like if the average entrepreneur stat is like 90 or 95% of companies fail, I feel like the ones that raise, it's not that different of a number.
You gonna give me a number? All right,
85%.
Oh yeah, you sort of know where I was going with it.
Yeah.
75% of venture-backed companies fail. And there's reasons for that. And because they push companies in a certain way. I'm working with a company that raised $60 million in venture funding. And the entrepreneur put a few $1 million as family money in. He was second to the funding from the venture capital because there's something called liquidation preference. And if you're ever raising money, please look up that definition of what that is. But basically, they get paid out first. Over 90, in this situation I'm working with, that gentleman completely wiped out, 99.9% after working for 15 years. And the company still has value. It might be worth $20 million, but they raised $60 million in venture capital. They get paid out first. The dilution is going to eventually come, or they're eventually going to wipe out the original investors or the original founders. So you have to be really cautious of this. But under a scenario where all the investors took the same risk, he had about 40% of the company, he would have walked away with $8 million. That wouldn't have been the end of the world, right? That's not the end of the world.
A lot of entrepreneurs don't know this, liquidation preferences. They don't know this world at all. I mean, unless you've done it before, you're raising money, you raise it on a safe or something like that. You don't really understand who gets their money out first, or maybe you do, but at that point, somebody's saying yes to you, and you're so damn excited about the fact that somebody's saying yes to you. You're not thinking 15 years down the road. You're thinking, oh my God, the entrepreneurship just worked out for me. I just found a way to raise money. This is what everybody wants to do. Like, how could I not be successful at this point? I think there's like so much emotion and a little bit of delusion when an entrepreneur is raising money that they're not paying attention to they're not paying attention to this. Because I know entrepreneurs that raise money and they say, well, we raise this at this valuation. A first-time entrepreneur, like, you're not going to have any company left in 10 years if you keep this up.
I know a kid who had a $1 billion company at the age of 28 who didn't know shit and got locked up for 16 months. Bad things do happen. The second thing I learned is liquidity or control. Liquidity or control. Never give up control of your company unless you're getting paid, unless you're taking chips off the table. spent 10 years building that company and 10 weeks screwing it up. So you're right. We don't know this kind of stuff. That's why people listening to your show, they can learn about these kind of things and be aware of, at least be aware of these kind of things. You know, over 90%, I'm giving another stat, over 90% of companies in the Inc. 5000 do not have venture capital. There's this notion that we all have to have venture capital. I mean, here is the vast majority of fastest growing companies in America do not have venture capital. There are other methods. My favorite method, if you do need to raise money, has been the Reg D, where you can sell securities to sophisticated investors. And we did this at .club. That was one of the next companies. .club was an alternative to .com, .net.
So if I actually look through all the companies, so you've done a lot. So yeah, so you got Tucows, you got Internet Direct, Hostopia, you Geeks for Less.
Geeks for Less, 800 people.
Don Club, and then Startup Club. That's the shirt you're wearing right now. So you've done
Don't forget paw.com.
Paw.com, yeah, that's actually still around. That's live right now, paw.com. So you've done it. So, I mean, if you look back at all the companies that you built, was there one that you enjoyed building, just the way that you built it more than others? One that was like the least stressful on you as an entrepreneur?
.club. And I'll tell you why. First of all, it's a recurring revenue business. It's digital. You have unlimited inventory. And we raised them. We did everything right from the beginning. You know, that coach I told you about, we brought him in from day one. We set up core values from day one. We set up the goal setting from day one. It was a micro global brand. We traveled to about 50 countries. Fortunately, we sold that company to GoDaddy about 6 months before the tech wreck in 2022. So
I think it's wild.
Everybody keeps saying that. That's why I was asked to speak at MIT on how I always seem to get the timing right. Well, if you remember, going back to that big, you know, I think those failures that we have, like, they really are scars of our past that help us guide us through those new ventures. And I was so scarred by that loss, so paranoid of liquidity or control, and so paranoid of bad things do happen. You do remember 2021, right? When there were $500,000 Bored Apes, when GameStop was hitting $300 a share, when SPACs were going crazy, absolutely crazy. And then 2022, it all came apart. The crypto crash, the tech wreck, SPACs collapsed. So in the book, I talk about exit, and I talk about 50% of values on exit is timing, okay? And we've actually now come up with a time to sell index, which we do in our monthly newsletter, and we come up with it every quarter. We update it. And by the way, right now it's at 3.6 out of 100. And it's based on empirical data. And this is only to send you a signal that when you see the time to sell index is here, exit stage left, it's time. Let other people take some money off the table. Let other people take your company to the next level. It's okay for other companies to make money. In fact, if you look at all of the companies that we've sold in the last 15 years, most of them were to strategic buyers. 17 times EBITDA. The .club one I'm not allowed to talk about, but I'll tell you it was a lot higher than that. I mean, you look at these valuations and they're incredible because, like, for instance, when we sold to GoDaddy Registry, they have way more distribution than we have. So they can take our product and they can distribute it to a much broader audience. So when you're thinking about exit, it's important to think about the companies that you're going to sell to. The least favorable are the private equity cash flow companies. I'm not saying you shouldn't do these if that's your only option, but they're my least favorite companies to sell to.
Is it because
everything's based on EBITDA, and when you have a high interest rate environment, they've got to borrow. They would borrow up to 75% of these acquisitions. Now I know it's come down in recent years, and the interest rates are up, so they might be paying 10, 11% interest rate. So they need to make 18, 19% interest rate. So they need to have that's a 5 times earnings on a multiple on a company. It's all based on the earnings multiple. Whereas a competitor, that's the second best, they can come along and they can buy your business based on somewhere in between the consolidated value and your street value, right? That earnings multiple. So they'll give you a bit of a premium because they're going to reduce the costs. but the best are the strategic buyers. If you can identify those and you position yourself to sell to those companies, you'll do so much better. And in the case of Hostopia, when we sold, the tax rate was 15% capital gains, and we were paying 42% corporate tax. So it would have taken us 30 years to get back the money based on a 17 times EBITDA multiple selling at that point because of the higher tax rates associated with income tax and earnings. So we're covering a lot of ground here, but you can see how from start, scale, exit, repeat, there is a formula.
There's a whole life cycle to this company that you sort of perfected after going through all these different kinds of exit events. Because I don't think many people have access to, okay, we've IPO'd this company and this one was strategic. Like, you've gone through all these different iterations of a company life cycle. So it lets you know, you have the experience as to what you like, what you don't like, what's best for the entrepreneur, what's best for, like, financially, what's best for the entrepreneur after they built this company, spent their whole life trying to scale this. So I think that this is the formula for, hey, I've gone through all these different permutations of companies. This is what I think you should do. So it's start, scale, exit to strategic, and then repeat that process. And that's really the net from all the different things that you've done.
Yeah, and we've learned a lot of patterns in start as well. Yeah. So for instance, we learned that the companies that you really want to think about launching are highly scalable, that you can build a moat or a defense around that company, and that catch a wave. And this is interesting because probably one of my mentors, I read his book back in the 90s, Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm, Inside the Tornado. We had the chance to interview him. And it was interesting interviewing him because I'd lived it for the prior companies that we had started. But really, one of the things that we've been really good at is figuring out how to catch a wave, how to cross a chasm and win in a tornado. And so in the book, we go into that formula as well, and we really talk about the things you can do to win in a tornado. I mean, there are basically three major things. One is make it easy. The easier you make your product or technology, the better off you'll be. I like Jeffrey Moore. He has, he has whoever delivers the fastest wins, right? And I mean, you think about those AOL diskettes back in the 90s, they sent it out, they killed CompuServe. Distribution is everything. At Pod.com, we're focused now on distributing products faster. So we come up with these really cool, trendy dog beds and rugs and blankets. But then a year later, 2 years later, we're finding them in Costco, right? So we've changed our formula now. We're dramatically increasing our distribution. So when we get a product that comes to market, it's a trendy product. It's trending up, and we've got about 3 or 4 right now that are hitting really nicely. We're scaling those really quickly. The third thing is focus. Be a laser beam. I invested in an AI company called Pensilla. And when they were first developing, it's been 2 years now in development, and they wanted to be sort of like a Canva 2.0. So, hey, guys, you're going to fail at this. They brought it down to become a Canva for e-commerce companies. They're integrated with more e-commerce, super niche, super laser beam, focused. If you're the best in the world at it, you're going to win. What the early majority in Tornado wants, they want products or services that are the leading products. You know, when you're in the innovator status, when you're early on, you can sort of compete in a market where you're competing for innovators. But early majority, they tend to be little followers, and they're very pragmatic. So they really want to grab onto technology that's pragmatic and that's succeeding. We talked about Hostopia and how the dominoes fell. Well, we had to win that Earthlink contract. We had to have that X factor. And then when we had that, then we were able to win all the other telecoms and sell the companies.
One thing you mentioned is very important, though, catching a wave. So how do you identify a wave?
Okay, so I have really cool ideas around this. First thing I do is I always live in the future. Brand new iPhone came in 4 days ago. I always have
damn, you were quick.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like people in my office are like, oh, I'm getting you a new iPhone, Colin. Okay. So they're already ordering the new iPhone because they know I want the latest technology. Got the glasses, got the fastest. I've always had the fastest internet. I was the number 984 for the Model X, right? You know, I'm always trying to live in the future. I call it live in the future, be part of the future, because when you're there, you begin to see opportunity. You know, I have every AI subscription out there. Everyone. I'm an AI junkie.
I do too. Yeah.
So, and if you're an entrepreneur today, really, this is probably one of the best times in history to be an entrepreneur because you can do so much with AI.
Yeah.
You know, I liken it to Tony Stark. You're familiar with Iron Man?
Of course. What do you mean?
He straps on that.
Of course.
He straps on that suit.
Yeah.
That's like me at the office now. I strap on that suit and I'm doing legal contracts. I'm not a lawyer. I'm doing marketing things. It's just amazing calculations. It's amazing what you can do with AI. And if you're not embracing it, you're going to fall behind. So that's the one thing I will say is you want to really focus on using the latest technology, and then you'll see opportunities. You'll be in your particular industry. There'll be opportunities in AI, and then you can apply those and actually build a company around that concept as well. So that's it. I mean, that is critical if you want to see where...
Like finger on the pulse of what's happening.
Exactly.
I'll tell you a funny story.
And here's the thing, though, because I worked at that Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
You know, when they were launching .club, they were deregulating the space. So sometimes it's a technical shift, sometimes it's a legal shift. Congress is making a new legislation to change something. So enter the entrepreneur. That is the point where we can move faster, quicker than the big companies. I reached out to the company that bought our company because they, you know, obviously I had this was a similar company. They did similar services. So I talked to the CEO, do you want to launch these TLDs? I want to launch one. Would that be okay with you? And he says, absolutely. It's too risky for us anyway. We don't want to go near it and whatnot. And so I said, okay, I'll launch it. And
this is a big company. It's all the
big
resources
company,
in the world.
Hundreds of millions of dollars of profit a year.
Yeah.
And they thought it's too risky to do. So here's this entrepreneur who says, okay, well, I'll do it. So we did it. We raised $12 million. We sold it to GoDaddy years later for a huge multiple for our investors. And that's it. They're fearful of technology. So if you, as an entrepreneur, if you can get that window, you've got a small window. Now, I think AI is moving faster than I've seen with a lot of technological shifts, but it also represents the greatest technological shift in our lifetime. It is great. It is the biggest. AI will make more millionaires than any other technological shift in history. Now you have a story.
I do have a story. I was laughing because I just came back from Boston, and you saw me at Inbound, and I did 2 sessions at Inbound, and one was on like marketing and content and brand, which is my thing. I live and breathe marketing and content right now. And obviously, by the way, so AI is fully integrated in my post-production workflow. Like every single piece of AI that you can possibly imagine that's consumer facing, I use it in some capacity for audio improvement. So I use Adobe to improve the sound coming out of these mics. So if we were in like a windy field, it would sound like we're in a studio. Maybe because we're actually in a studio, it gives me like a 5% increase in audio quality, but the same AI could be used if you're recording this in the middle of a construction site. So and then obviously long form video gets turned into a whole bunch of short form with Opus. I mean, Perplexity is just like a sandbox for everything else, for all the kinds of generative chat that you want to create. So my team uses AI in all their post-production workflow. It kind of like as a first pass at the creative process is the best way to put it. It's never going to be the final solution, and it's not going to be good enough to put out and post, but it's going to be very good at getting 80 to 90% of the work done at a fraction of the cost or the time or the energy. But to show you how people still aren't picking up AI, I was asked to do a talk at Inbound, not just on content. The second talk was on AI, only because I use it in my post-production workflow. I'm not a developer. I'm not technical. I literally just use tools that I pay between 20 to 30 bucks a month for, and that already positioned me better to speak about how AI can impact your marketing strategy than a room full of 10,000 marketers, which is wild to me. And the point is, I should not be the one teaching AI. I should not be the one teaching about AI. This has been around for a year and a half, and still marketers for large organizations are not using it and are not understanding it and are listening to a guy like me who is solopreneur, basically with a very small team doing a podcast, who just nerds out at AI. That's the person who's teaching them. It should be the inverse. But I think the companies are very slow to adopt. This is not like it's not to say that all companies are not adopting, because some are, but I think that a lot of companies are very hesitant to include it in their workflows. And I think that's a mistake. I think that's an opportunity for entrepreneurs and it's an opportunity for disruption, but I think it's a massive mistake. So I don't know if you're listening to this in your company, like start figuring out how to use it.
And my favorite little hack recently are custom GPTs. I don't know if you've been playing with custom GPTs.
I haven't yet. Have you? And so there's also agents now.
You can
Agents
use it
that
for two different purposes. You can use a private one.
Yes.
So for instance, you just open up a private, it takes 10 seconds, click on it, upload a contract. Now, anytime I have a question for that contract, I just go to that custom GPT and I ask the question as if it's a lawyer. And that custom GPT knows that contract better than your lawyer. We had a very big contract at paw.com. And so we went into it. I asked it 100, and I keep beating it up. I keep asking questions. Then we said, okay, this is too big to just let AI run it. So we went to the lawyers. We had them do it. They came back with the exact same answers. I thought it was fascinating. Second thing is you can post your GPTs in a store now and make them public. Yes. And by the way, you don't have to be a programmer at all. So like you said, you can't program. I'm horrible. I'm not a geek. I only aspire to be one, right? So I go in there and I create these little apps now. And we did this for a workbook. So we just started Scale Exit workbook. Yeah. And
is that almost done yet?
That's live. It actually was a bestseller last week.
I didn't know that because when we spoke last time, there was somebody who was ripping off your book on it.
That's right. They were doing workbooks. Oh yeah. That's, whatever. That irritated me because the quality was so bad. So what we did is we put in all these exercises. We put in QR codes and domain names. Like you can go to personalityprofileai.com and you can actually use a GPT that will tell you your DISC profile, your Myers-Briggs profile, and then compare you to other celebrities as well. And you can do that with all your staff, and it's free. This is what we're talking about. This is the world we're moving to. And I simply answered questions and sat there and spent, and there's some tricks you need to do it, like to really make it usable, like make it multiple choice. Start with question 10, go down to question 1. Some tricks you need to do, but it's a really cool hack. That should be the next one you play with.
I love that. But why do you think, okay, so I'm actually very impressed with your book. And I don't usually like completely focus on the book when we do a podcast, but how many you sent me some accolades or some rankings or some top charts that you hit with this book. And I'm super curious where this book has ended up right now. Because I can probably pull it up.
Well, I'll tell you. I could.
Yeah, tell me. Yeah.
I think 30 years as a serial entrepreneur.
But I'm also curious why.
Yep.
Why this book did so well.
30 years as a serial entrepreneur. 10 years writing the book. We interviewed over 200 people.
That's insane. No 200 people. 10 years writing a book.
I know, it's insane. I did it on airplanes. There's one passage in there about .club which was written 10 years ago, so I kept the exact thing, because this was before .club launched. I wrote it. It's fascinating, and so I kept exactly. I said we're going to follow this, the start, scale, exit, repeat methodology. We're going to focus on story, people, money, and systems, and it's there. So we also of the 200 people we interviewed, phenomenal people, and only about 50 have actually made the book. We also wrote the book for ADHD entrepreneurs. There's 58 chapters, and they're very short and digestible. And by the way, it's stories. It's the stories, my stories, and it's the stories of those other 50 people who were interviewed for the book. Then we also put in illustrations, 30 illustrations. We color-coded it. Forbes Books did a phenomenal job putting this book together and making it look like a world-class book. It's been #1 on Amazon in 15 categories. It's won 13 awards globally, and it came out 11 months ago. It's already won 13 awards. It's the most awarded book on entrepreneurship in 2024.
That's phenomenal. Congratulations, dude.
Thank you.
It's phenomenal.
And you do these things. I see a lot of my friends, they launch these books, and people are famous people launching these books.
Well, I know, because I get them all on my podcast. I get them all on my podcast, Colin.
And I look at and like last week, we were #1 in every category. We were the number 4th. We were #1 in entrepreneurship for a week, and we were number 4 of all business books in the United States last week. It was up there with Elon Musk and Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, right? So that was fascinating.
I think that there's a lesson there. I think putting 10 years into something, like there's so much competition at the bottom and mid-market in terms of like mediocreness. There's so much competition when you put out mediocre content. There's so much competition when you build a mediocre company. But when you put so much time and energy into something and you are in like the 0.001% of individuals, which I think taking 10 years to write a book definitely puts you.
Well, I had some other businesses to run too.
Yeah, I know. But there really is not a lot of competition at the top of the market when you put that much energy or effort into something. And I think that we are in an era where everyone's trying to do the least and expect the most. And I think that people are so frustrated because they don't stand out on social, or they don't feel like they write a book in a couple months and they put it out and nobody buys it. Like, why does minimal effort not equal output or outcome? I think it's really because, like anything, you just have to put a lot of yourself into it, and the market recognizes when you put a lot of yourself into it. I believe that's why it's so successful, because you spent so long and so much energy and blood and sweat and tears and insight and thought leadership and experience goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of very successful entrepreneurs like myself, they write books and it's all about them. This book is not an autobiography. Yes, there are those stories are in there, right? There are stories in there, but it's not about me. It's about the reader who wants to learn how to start a business. It's about the reader who wants to learn how to scale the business. It's about a reader who wants to learn how to exit. And it's also about the leader who wants to know how to do this over and over again. So it's really, it's a philosophy, and it's different. It's a different philosophy too than a lot of other books out there. You know, I read at the very beginning of the book that if you want to become a unicorn, this is the wrong book for you. This is all about building a solid foundation, a base, building something up, selling that off, taking some money off the table because bad things do happen, and then repeating that process over and over again. See, entrepreneurship, you are not a CEO of one particular company. You're not just a podcaster. You're an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurship is a trade. And if you can learn that trade, you can increase your chances of success dramatically. In fact, we've seen that with serial entrepreneurs. They have a much higher chance of succeeding. It's like almost double. It's like 18% for a first time, and it's 36% for a second or third time entrepreneur. Because even if they failed in the past, because they've had that experience doing it. It really is a trade, and we need to learn how to sharpen that sword and improve our knowledge on the topic of entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of mental health challenges that we have to talk about as well.
We'll talk about that in a second. I want to just sort of tie a bow in sort of the concepts coming out of the book as well, and then we can talk about mental health and a couple other concepts. But so just so that people are clear, because we sort of gone back and forth between, I would say, two frameworks, because you have start, scale, exit, repeat, but then you also have story, people, money, and systems. So how do these two frameworks play into each other?
Okay, so in start, you have to come up with the idea, you have to solve a problem. So you're talking about the story. And then you also have the people. Who do you need in start? And really it's all about the entrepreneur in start, right? And then you have systems. They talk about systems in start. I just say, just figure out your KPIs. Don't get too complicated.
So these four components, they do play a piece in each one of those
section, but they change dramatically.
I gotcha.
Between each section, and that's how we wrote the book. So you'll see there's the story, people, money, and systems in start, and then there's story, people, money, and systems in scale. And by the way, it's all different in exit. You wouldn't be surprised how many things you can do as an individual, as an entrepreneur, to increase the valuation of your company just by understanding what goes into selling the company, by understanding the mindset of the buyer. I was on when I did work for the Fortune 500 company, I bought probably about 15 companies. So I totally understand the mindset of the buyer now. And so that's reflected in the book as well.
I have to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's podcast, LinkedIn. Now, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. And did you know that in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites? So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. What really amazed me was how quickly I found qualified candidates on LinkedIn. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's like hiring professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. As small business owners, we're always juggling multiple responsibilities. LinkedIn understands this and constantly finds ways to make the hiring process easier. They've even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. And it's really no wonder why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. I can't recommend it enough for finding top-notch professionals who could take your business to the next level. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/excellence. That's linkedin.com/excellence to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. when you go through this process of start, scale, exit, repeat, what are the things, because again, this is positioned for an entrepreneur. You're not trying to build a unicorn or $1 billion company. If it happens, good for you. But you're trying to build a process that it's almost like you're teaching entrepreneurship. It's not just dumb luck. This is a process that can be repeated again and again and again, as you've shown, as you've done in your own life. But what are, keeping the end in mind or the exit in mind, what are the most important things in the start process that can impact the exit process?
Well, I think one of the things we did at .club is we actually identified the buyer who we wanted to buy the company from day one, right? And we knew it was GoDaddy. Right? I mean, they're the big ones. They're the elephant, right?
They wanted to.
And so often we go to conferences and we pitched to GoDaddy, met with people, got to know them at the conferences. I like to, when we start a company, I always say, one of the biggest challenges when you're selling a company are the schedules and the due diligence. So make certain every contract is in a virtual drive. Every single contract. It's got, you can't be scrambling at the last minute to put documents together. And we know bad things can happen, right? And when they've got 20 people on the other side, you got 2, right? And that's it. And it's daunting when you go into these exit processes, and it can take months and get bogged down. But no, you need to, when you get into deal mode, it's closed mode. There's no such thing as weekends or evenings. It's a football game. You got to get that ball across the line. That's it. And if you're not organized, it's going to make it that much harder to actually sell the company down the road.
So then
we also want to stay
like
pure.
A family business from the...
Right. Yeah. We also want to stay pure. We're running a software platform company. We don't want to buy a farm and put that in the company. And this is, it's got to be clean. Okay. And there are other things we need to do as well. For instance, to get venture capital, or if you want to stay within the normal standards. Like, for instance, when you do give options in your company, you want to do it between 10 and 20% of your company. If you go too much higher, it's going to be negative for your valuations down the road. You go a little too low, that can be negative as well. But you generally want to be around 10 to 15% for options in your company. So there's certain standards that you can set up early on as well. And we talk a lot about that in the book. It really isn't the type of book that's going to tell you how to make $1 billion. And I worry a lot about... And I've seen too many companies, I've invested in too many company founders where they get Silicon Valley disease. And this is a term that I coined based on this concept that we get this venture funding, and we're going to build it out, and we're going to build that $1 billion company. By the way, they're pushing you. They're pushing you to get the 10X. They want you to gamble. They want the gamble. They don't want that double or triple. That's not what they want. So they're actually pushing you. And it also can lead to issues in your company and spending that you shouldn't really be doing. One of my favorite forms of funding is customer-funded startups. And we had a gentleman named John Mullins on who wrote the book, Customer-Funded Startup. And we interviewed him for this book. And I can't tell you how many companies, that Fortune 5,000 list, use customer-funded techniques, use your customers to fund your business.
So if you look at all the entrepreneurs that you've invested in, I will talk about mental health now, but the last question on this is all the entrepreneurs that you've invested in, all the lessons that you've learned as an entrepreneur, what is the biggest misconception about entrepreneurship that you see time and time again?
I think that everybody thinks they have a great idea, but ideas are worthless. Actions are priceless. We had a situation back in 2004 where we were traveling all over the world for this Hostopia, selling the telecom, and we go to these office parks. And we leave the meeting and we try to get a taxi, and it was almost impossible. So we're sitting in a dacha in Ukraine. Dacha is like a cabin in Ukraine on a farm. And we're doing some drinks and stuff like that too. And we're coming up with ideas, and we says, what irritates us? We can never seem to get a taxi. Why don't we launch a company? At the time, we had a mobile development company, which was developing games. And we said, but why don't we develop a company? We call it My Yellow Button. So it's one yellow button. You press the yellow button on your phone, and then you can see the taxi coming towards you with GPS. And literally, the team went back.
Before Uber.
This was 3 years before Uber, right? And the team went back, and we got distracted. We came up with another game. We never got around to it. We never took action on it. We didn't take action on it. And all of a sudden, Uber and Lyft launched worth billions of dollars. And, and now I can laugh about it. I still own the domain name, though. My Yellow Button, if you want to buy it for $20.
I feel like it had a little bit more value pre-Uber and Lyft than it does right now. But that could be, listen, I've seen a lot of companies build competitors that they build them to be acquired by Uber or Lyft.
No, you can do that too, because that's your thinking with the exit in mind. Yeah. That's smart.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of these, there's another strategy that I think is very interesting. There's these brothers, they're German brothers. Have you heard of this family? And what they do is they copy ideas in the US and they take it to the German market.
Yeah, that's quite common as well. And Canadians, we can copy ideas in the US. Americans can copy Canadian ideas. I mean, I think that's actually a smart idea.
I think it's very smart because you already know that the idea works.
Right, just bring it to your market.
Bring it to your market. I can't remember the name of them now, but they've done it a few times. They've done it with like Pinterest. They've done it with, and now they're billionaires. So they've just taken US tech ideas and brought them to Germany. And I actually have a friend right now who has taken an idea from China, which is these pop-up phone charger stands, and now he's bringing it to the US. And basically you're walking in a stadium or an airport and your phone's dying. There'll be a little pop-up and there's like 20 different ports that you plug your phone into, and apparently they're everywhere in China. Now he's bringing that over to the US. So I mean, there's something to be said for not having to like reinvent the wheel when it comes to businesses as well, because the ideas that work, they're all already out there. It's just, like you said, it's action. It's all about action. It's all about action. So talk to me about mental health. What plagues entrepreneurs? Because I know as an entrepreneur, I haven't done what you've done, but already what I've done in my short career, very stressful, very lonely. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm fortunate that I have Gina too. And I feel like that's, having somebody who sort of brings you out of the anxiety and the stress when something bad happens, just remind you that it's not so bad and, life's going to go on. I think that's very important as well. I think I have a very strong mental fortitude. I don't even deal with big issues, but I know that some of the issues that I do deal with, I think that would really stress out somebody who's only ever worked a 9-to-5 W-2 before. So I don't think mental health is spoken about enough with entrepreneurs. And I think it's something that we should bring up. I know you have stories as well, but even talk about from your own personal experience. Dude, I haven't lost $130 million. I haven't taken a company public. I don't even know how I would deal with those situations. I'm sure I'd manage, but how about yourself? Like when you went through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why we had to have a chapter in the book on mental health, because, and by the way, it's the last chapter of the book. The formula of success. Yeah, you can lay out all these formulas, but if you don't deal internally with what goes on, this is a roller coaster. You're launching a business. It's a really tough thing to do. And those downs, sure, the highs feel pretty good, right?
The checks are nice.
Those down periods are very hard. The nervousness, the payroll, the fact you might lose your home, the interest rates going up, the external factors. It's very stressful. 49%. Let me tell you something about entrepreneurs. They are neurodiverse in a lot of ways. And that neurodiversity is a positive and sometimes can be negative. Okay? 49% of entrepreneurs have some form of mental illness. 30% have depression, 29% ADHD, 11% have addiction issues, 9% are bipolar. The fact is, we have these things. Some of these things are talent for us and help us be successful, and some of these things can be dangerous. I had a good friend here in South Florida. He had a company he'd run for about 15 years. It was one of those like buy your ugly houses type companies. And he ran his company for 15 years. He had 100 employees. On Friday, he laid them off. This was like 8 months ago. And because the interest rates had gone up, nobody was selling homes anymore. In his business, he had 100 employees. Friday, he laid all his people off. On Tuesday, he committed suicide. And I don't think it needed to happen, because this gentleman was so talented at creating and building businesses. Yes, he needed to shut the company down. Yeah, the interest rates took him out, external factors. But he could have come back down the road when the interest rates came down, or he could have launched new businesses. We need to talk about this. We need to surround ourselves with others in a community. I belong to an organization called EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. Every month, 8 of us get together and we talk about our personal, family, and business issues. There are incubators out there. There's a community out there. And I think the more that we get help from others, the more we talk about it, I think the better it is. The reality is, though, I can talk like this, but and you know about the Tony Hsieh story too, and we talk about that in the book, and how unfortunately he's a billionaire and he dies. We don't know if it was accident or suicide, but we know it was definitely mental health challenges. The reality is, entrepreneurs, they're strong individuals, they're perfect, they live the perfect life, and it's hard for an entrepreneur to do that. It's hard for an entrepreneur to say, look, I have an issue. But I think if we can, just like I ask entrepreneurs to identify their personality profile, try to identify your own neurodiversity, right? And use that to your advantage, right? If addiction is a bit of an issue, and for me, buying domain names is like an addiction. But how do I use that to my advantage, right? How do I take that and use that to my advantage? At the same time, how do we address the negatives of entrepreneurship, the ups and the downs? And it's not just you. It's your family. It's your family's my wife has gone through 30 years of hell, up and downs and great. Yeah, we've landed well at the end of it all. But the reality is it's not easy. Been a lot of rough times in my career. Yeah, it's not easy. But I think it's important to find people that you can get to talk to about this in a safe environment. And there are people out there. There are groups and organizations out there that can help you do that.
I think it's also important to understand that no matter what you're going through, this is sort of what I was alluding to with when sort of Gina pulls me back from shitty situations. First of all, it's not as bad as you think it is, because life does go on. And second of all, there's somebody who's dealt with that just at a bigger scale who can probably help you navigate it. And I think that is very hard for the person living in the situation to understand. But again, if you have friends who have gone through this and who've dealt with it, all of a sudden it just puts it in perspective. It helps you sort of like zoom out a little bit and understand that whatever's happening right now, yeah, you shut down a company with 100 people, but there's companies that laid off 3,000 people last week. And it's not to say it's a shitty circumstance, but it definitely doesn't warrant you taking your own life. Like there's so much on the other side of that. The fact that you could have done that the first time, literally, I mean, this is what you teach. It's like, if you can do it once, you can do it repeatedly.
And in this particular case, it came out afterwards that it was he did it because it was his identity. He was a successful entrepreneur who ran this business. That's not your identity. You are an entrepreneur, and you're going to experience failures, and you're going to accept successes. Don't be too arrogant when you are successful as well. And when you do falter, when it does all fall apart, let's learn from that. Let's take that scar and let's make something of it, right? And that's our identity. We're entrepreneurs. That's what we do all the time. We face those hardships. We fail. We get back up. We do it again. We build something. We get back. We do it over and over again. We start, scale, exit, repeat. Was there a
time 130 million when you were...
Why do you have to keep saying that?
Because it's such a huge number.
Like, it was even bigger back then with inflation.
So the reason why I keep bringing that up is because I think a lot of people would have not been so keen on starting again after that.
Yeah, you know what I did? I really internally focused on what I love to do. And what we loved was technology and how that can change the world. That's why we jumped right into Hostopia and that hosting and web platform, and we began to scale that. And it wasn't easy either. That was, we had to get venture capital. We were taking massive losses up to 9/11 happened, and $500,000 a month. And it wasn't easy, but every month was getting better, and we built it, and we just focused on what we loved, building technology companies.
And I think that has to be your North Star. So outside of all of it, because if your North Star is money, or if your North Star is fame, or if your North Star is anything but what you love, I don't think you'll make it through.
I agree.
I don't think you'll make it through.
You can't handle those downs. Like in paw.com,
yeah.
I had 3 King Charles Spaniels. Now I have a Cavapoo. Fortunately, 3 are gone. But you'd be surprised at how much these dogs have influenced the products. The current CEO, Michelle Van Tilburg, she's got 3 dogs and big doodles, and how every product is, we love dogs. We love building dog products. We love inventing new dog products. That's what helps you when you get to those low points. And you're always going to hit low points in any startup.
I have a question about passion, because this is sort of what we're talking about. And I think this is always sort of a debate for me. If entrepreneurs are passionate about something, great, it will carry them through the highs and the lows, but it can also blind them to the realities of the market if they're too passionate about something and the market doesn't actually need their solution. So how do you balance that passion and that pragmatism when you're building a company?
So in the start section of the book, we have something called stage gates. Stage gates are, do you remember that video game, car driving game, when you're driving around the track and you have to get through the gates? And if you don't, you got to put another quarter in. You probably don't remember quarters.
I do remember I'm not that young.
Okay.
I went to arcades.
Okay. If you don't have if you don't get through the gate, then you got to put more money in. You got to keep going. I call it a stage gate in the book. This is a certain specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely goal, smart goal that you're going to pick in the future. And if you don't hit it, you either pivot or kill it. But here's the other thing from a mental challenge, because entrepreneurs, and I had this when I was starting businesses early on, so many people are saying, oh, you're wasting your time. You should go get a law degree. You should go to this. Oh, this idea not going to work. You say, look, guys, my stage gate is I'm going to have an MVP ready by this date, on this time, in the future, and I'm going to show it to investors and try to raise $100,000 or $1 million. That's my MVP. If it doesn't happen, fine, then you can rain on my parade. But until then, I have the flexibility and freedom to achieve that. That's why I love the concept of stage gates, and I love putting them in different stage gates. So I'll do one, and then I'll do a second stage gate. And in the start book, we also have something called the 4 sticky note business plan. Why sticky notes? Because you can stick them on the board, and they're small. Because this is a business plan just for you, just for your own strategic thinking, and it takes you probably about a half hour to put this business plan together. And included in that are the stage gates. And how much money do I need to raise to get to that stage gate? Who are the people I need to get to that stage gate? And what are the KPIs, the systems? What are the KPIs I need to track performance to get to that stage gate?
You mentioned a few times, you just mentioned like raising money. And this is another thing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs get confused about. So you also said sometimes customer funding is the best way to build a business, but of course you've raised money as well. So when you look at the two options, raising money or not, is there certain things that you look for or signals that indicate this particular type of business should be something that we raise venture capital or even just angel investment for versus not?
Absolutely. So if we were in a very very fast moving environment, like for instance, I remember Clubhouse, that app from years ago, they had to raise a lot of money fast, because otherwise, if they didn't, then you'd have the big competitors. And guess what did happen? Spaces came in, Chatter came in from Meta, LinkedIn Audio. I mean, all these competitors came out with a solution. So if you're in a market like that, you have to move quickly. Venture capital is your best route. Silicon Valley, I know I talk about the negatives, but it's also been the most successful environment in the world to raise money. And more successful companies have come out of Silicon Valley than any other ecosystem in the world. So I'm very positive about it for the right type of company. If you need to move quickly, if by holding back and allowing others to take your market share, you've made a huge mistake. This is when we do need to bring in venture capital to allow us to win that market. Because if we wait too long, if we try to do it if we're too conservative all the way along, somebody else is going to take that market. And that's, I'd rather own a smaller percentage of a product that wins in the marketplace than of a niche product or a much smaller product that has a much lower market share. Because typically the winners take the lion's share of the.
So that's how you have to look at it. And I think it all comes down to not just following a trend, but understanding what kind of business you're trying to build and what kind of market. I mean, there's so many different versions of entrepreneurship too. I mean, I speak about this a lot, but some people don't even want to sell. Some people want to build lifestyle businesses.
It's my wife. My wife owns a school. She just wanted to get to a certain level. She's got a great school, and a greatschools.org. It's the highest rated in Fort Lauderdale. That's it.
And you don't have to sell that if you don't want to. But you have to decide what you want to do. And I think that's very important. I think self-awareness is probably one of the most powerful things you can have as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, you know what? A lot of them are arrogant.
I know they are.
When I work, especially one particular one I'm thinking right now. I won't mention names.
Oh my God.
He's the CEO, but he thinks he knows everything. And, he doesn't. And when you think you know everything, that's the worst mistake you can make. When you begin to recognize I don't know everything, when you begin to pick up books like The E-Myth or 0 to 1 or Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat, when you begin to learn these philosophies, that can strengthen your ability to succeed in entrepreneurship. It'll increase your chances of success.
What would be some of the most harmful behaviors that you see or with entrepreneurs when they're trying to scale or achieve success? What are things that they absolutely should not do?
Try to do everything yourself. Okay, so in the START methodology, we talk about entrepreneurs, they delegate tasks, right? You have to be, it's like weaning a baby. You have to sort of be aware of everything. When you're in the scale mode, it's delegate responsibilities, not tasks, okay? And this is important because this is more than just a 9-to-5 role. This is a 24-hour role. And when you're responsible for every aspect of a business, now I mentioned my wife, she hasn't figured out the philosophy of delegating responsibilities. She has 16 teachers, 100 students, and about 50 parents or 60 parents, and she has got her hands in everything, okay? But she's up in 3 o'clock in the morning almost every freaking night, worried about this or worried about that. When you've got people who are now responsible, let's say you have someone who's responsible for the IT or responsible for the sales, and you're not having to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, they'll have to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but they're focused on this one specific area. But that's their job, exactly. But if you're delegating those tasks and you're not letting go of your company, you're not delegating responsibilities, you're going to hold yourself back.
I love that. That's good. What did we not go into that you think is important for entrepreneurs to know?
Like I mean, the book covers so much. We could do like so many shows on.
We could do one show
just on each section. Exactly.
I know that,
right? Because
this is a teaser.
So much. It really does.
10 years. No one spends 10 years writing a book.
Yeah.
Are you going to do another one?
You always have to say the negative things, don't you?
How is that negative? I think that makes you an outlier.
I didn't actually do well in English in school. Just so you know, I did not have the best marks. I was much better at math and economics and things like that. And actually, it's interesting because my twin brother, he says, I really liked your book. And he goes, I liked it because it was simple. I understood it. There wasn't, sometimes you get these business books that are ethereal and like really complicated.
Which I can't stand.
This is just, street language on the street. This is how it is. It's my voice. It's who I am.
I think it's actually super ironic how everything that I think is your superpower, you think is a negative. So good copywriting is at a 5th grade level. That is good copywriting.
I can't do more than a 5th grade
But I'm dead serious. This is not like me just like making up. If you want the book to hit home, if you want writing to hit home, you have to write at a 5th grade level. You have to take very complex ideas. And I actually think that shows that you know the concept better. And you take a very complex idea and you can find a way to communicate it at a 5th grade level. I think that if you can't do that, that means that you actually don't have a mastery of the concept. That's my so yeah.
Well, I was surprised we got 13 awards because literary awards and top. We had American Legacy Book Awards, top book for entrepreneurship in 2024. We had the International Book Awards. We had won the best nonfiction first time author, and then like IBPA, we won a silver medal for business and communications category. So I mean, these are big categories, and so I was actually surprised we did so well. But we did have human editors, thankfully, and a lot of Forbes books did a great job at helping with the editing and cleaning it up a little bit. But it's definitely, it's written very simply.
I think it's great. I mean, I've read it. It's great. It's also, out of all the books, and I mean, I don't have all my books out here. I used to have all my books out here in the old studio. But I think it's like one of the biggest books that I have.
Yeah, it really is big. It was double the size of any Forbes published book. They kept getting mad at me, and I said, well, I kept trying to cut it. But if I cut this, then the entrepreneurs they won't know how to do this, or they won't know how to do that. But it's very easy. It's like 58 chapters, and they're very short chapters. So you could just jump to a part of the book, or you can. I mean, I think it's a good idea to read the whole book. But also we have this gentleman who did the Audible. He's actually a fellow Canadian.
Why didn't you do your own Audible?
No, I can't. Are you kidding me? He's a fellow Canadian who did Budweiser commercials.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and so he does quite an entertaining job when he reads the book.
I didn't do that.
Because I said, I'm not going to have somebody reading it and putting people to sleep. So he's a little animated. He's a bit animated. He does a good job. So the Audible comes across very well.
Very good. Okay, so are you going to write another one, or is this it?
People keep saying, right now, what we are doing is coming out 4 workbooks, one for Start, one for Scale, one for Exit, one for Repeat. The Start one is out there right now. Scale, I'm having a lot of fun with this, but this is going to be the most complicated workbook ever produced for the scaling. I'm partnered with 2 other firms, the Rhythm Systems, who I told you about, and then also Jack Daly and Dan Larson, who wrote the Sales Playbook. I'm working with them as well. So we're putting together something that could really make a difference for somebody who wants to take their business and scale it. And it's going to have, of course, we're going to have AI, custom GPTs embedded throughout it.
I love it. So if they want to connect with you, Startup Club?
Yeah, just go to startup.club, sign up to our email list. We do 1 email a month that is like a publication, right? And that's where we have the time to sell index now. I've added that into it. But we list the authors that are coming on to our show. We do a live Clubhouse show. But
you actually have one of the, people don't even know that, or maybe some of them do, but that's the largest entrepreneur Clubhouse.
Yep. So almost 1 million members, actually over 1 million members now. We have 80,000 on YouTube, and we just started TikTok a month ago. I'm excited about that. We got 500 followers already.
I've seen your content. It's good.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
so we're just starting that, and that's taking off. And I'm like, wow, because the key demographic, our persona, is an individual between the age of 18 and 34.
So younger.
It's a younger demographic, right? And I think we had to think like that, because you can't just post it on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm very big on LinkedIn. We do very well on LinkedIn. But the reality is, to reach the sort of younger audience, we said, let's go into TikTok. So we started a TikTok.
How does your business content do on TikTok?
It just seems to be doing very well. Yeah. Like
I got to figure out TikTok. I haven't figured it out yet. I got.
What's nice about it is you don't have to have a lot of followers, and you can get a lot of views right away.
Right. Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. But we're looking for engagement as well. So if you want to follow us on TikTok, there's fun videos we come out with every week. But the best way to do it, really get in the know-how, is just go to startup.club, sign up to our email list. And if you want to buy the book, go to Amazon, and you can buy it in Audible, hardcover, softcover, and Kindle as well.
All that will go in the show notes too, so I'll get all the links for everything. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, look, just to be clear.
Thank God you brought her to
startup.club, right? But it's www.startup.club.
Okay, perfect.
That's right, yeah.
www.startup.club.
Yeah. And we've written now, I think I've written about 20 articles for Forbes as well, which we link in startup.club as well. So
this is like, everyone, if you're listening right now, Colin is like all things entrepreneurship. So there is not really many questions as an entrepreneur that you could have that he does not have an answer to somewhere, whether or not it's in the book or whether or not it's on TikTok or YouTube. Like, I mean, you live and breathe this. And I've seen your co-working space. I've seen some of the people, like some of the companies you've invested in. I saw your talk at EO. So I think in Fort Lauderdale at the tower or whatever it's called. Yeah, there's not much that you don't cover in your content.
Yeah,
or that you haven't dealt with yourself, by the way, which is actually that's the X factor in good content.
I do tend to sort of stay above the fray though, and I don't get involved in the weeds. I don't rely on, of course, I delegate responsibilities, right? So I delegate people to do the TikTok and the LinkedIn and all the other aspects of our businesses. So I'm not a social media expert at all. So if you start asking me a question like, I was getting nervous there for a second.
No, I'm not going to ask you a question. No, I'm not going to ask you
a TikTok, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. What I know is my team's doing a great job. I mean, I can tell you that.
Hiring the right people, that's half the battle. No, my point is, why I love and respect you so much as an entrepreneur is because you've gone through, again, I alluded to this before, but you've gone through so many versions of entrepreneurship that I don't think many people, even people that are massively successful, it's kind of like they stay within the same version of entrepreneurship, and they had one big success, or they've tried one thing repeatedly, then they have a success. But I don't know many people that, again, have gone through exit events, for, like a strategic buyer, also IPO'd, highly successful, failed at the degree that you failed as well. Like there's so many different versions that you've lived through. That's why I think the information is valuable, because I think information, you can go find it on YouTube, but unless a person's lived through it, it doesn't mean anything. That's my 2 cents at least. But no,
I agree. And there's there are 50 other stories in the book as well that really resonated well with us and the team, and we put them in there as well.
So we've gone through a lot. Did we not touch on something that you wanted to go into?
I think we've covered
a lot. Okay, the last question, laughing at me. Last question. If you could go back and you could tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would that be?
Believe in yourself. Because you know what? I didn't really believe in myself when I was in my early 20s. I had business partners, and I relied on the business partners, and one of them turned out to be a massive disaster and caused a big fight. And I recognized my instinct was right at the time, but I was so young and I was thinking I didn't really know what I was doing, but my instinct was right. I should have just believed more in my instincts. And it took me until my mid-30s to really break off from the people around me who were not helping me, but pulling me down, right? So, fire those people quickly in your life, hire yourself, believe in yourself. And, when you're an entrepreneur, you have the right instinct. And the second thing is you have the right instinct, but then you don't really know what the hell you're doing. So that's when you do bring in a coach. And when I brought in a coach, Patrick Tian from Rhythm Systems, it changed my life. He's been my coach now for almost 15 years in all my companies. So he's amazing.